What if Higuruma were in Demon Slayer? What sentences would he pass on the demons? More importantly, how would the sorcerer's presence change the story of Demon Slayer? And after all, how did he end up there? Look, after the traumatic events in Shinjuku, a special grade curse is born and meets the genius sorcerer, transporting him to the Demon Slayer universe. Higuruma finds himself in the dense forest of Mount Natagumo. In front of him, steel threads cut through the forest with surgical precision. He spots Tanjiro Kamado, completely exhausted and trying to protect his sister Nezuko. At the top of the webs, Rui, lower 5, was watching him. Seeing another prey, if that's what we can call it at the moment, Rui attacks him. Higuruma doesn't draw a Nichiren sword because he carries something much more dangerous, cursed energy. He summons his domain expansion, Deadly Sentence. The world around Rui and Tanjiro dissolves in an instant. The dense forest transforms into Higuruma's courtroom, with the judgment at the center of the room. Rui, confused, tries to use his blood art to slash the intruder, but realizes with horror that violence is physically forbidden inside the domain. Here, brute force is irrelevant before the law. Higuruma, in his domain, takes on the role of prosecutor and presents the accusation. The murder of dozens of humans to create a fake family. Built on fear, Rui tries to justify his actions as a search for true bonds. But for Judman, that is irrelevant. The verdict is proclaimed with a strike of the gavel, death penalty. At this moment, Rui's sentence produces two effects: confiscation and the granting of the executioner's sword. The confiscation completely seals Rui's blood art, making his webs disappear instantly. Without his technique, Rui is reduced to a basic demon, losing the only advantage that kept him at the top of the lower moon's hierarchy. Higuruma advances against Rui, and with a single strike from the executioner's sword, Higuruma completely purges Rui. Notice that, unlike the Nichiren blades, this weapon doesn't just cut flesh, it erases the existence of any convict sentenced to death. Rui disintegrates not because of the sun, but because of the absolute sentence of a system he couldn't corrupt. Tanjiro watches everything in absolute shock. That man in the suit doesn't use breathing techniques, doesn't have a metal sword, but he manipulated reality itself. Higuruma looks at the boy and at Nezuko. He then realizes that she is a demon, but the judgment shows no sign of a crime. To Higuruma, she is just a victim. Intrigued, Higuruma stands before Tanjiro and Nezuko, questioning the two hunters. He wants to know where he is and why he was teleported to that place. As the conversation goes on, the Hashiras, Shinobu Kochu, and Giyu Tomioka begin to secure the defeat of the Onis. See, up until this moment, Higuruma's presence creates an immediate and dangerous butterfly effect. Since he intervened too early, Tanjiro wasn't able to awaken his Hinokami Kagura. Tomioka would easily mistake Higuruma for a civilian, meaning something that wouldn't cause immediate conflict. That is, until Shinobu and Kanao go after Nezuko, trying to exterminate her. Fortunately, Tomioka stops the insect Hashira and Tanjiro would stop Kanao. The fight would seem endless until Higuruma intervened in favor of Nezuko. Stopping Kanao alongside Tanjiro and seeking answers, Higuruma, together with Tanjiro and Nezuko, is taken to the Demon Slayer Corps. There, Sanemi, true to his brutal and impulsive nature, goes after Kaito and Nezuko to prove that every demon is a bloodthirsty beast. But before his Nichiren blade can even touch the wood, he finds himself in a courtroom where the sound of his own breathing feels like thunder in the absolute silence. Now this is where most people get it wrong. They think Higuruma's domain is only meant to punish obvious violent crimes. But, as we've already seen in Jujutsu Kaisen, the first time we see his domain in action, he uses it to expose Itadori entering a casino as a minor. Here, however, Higuruma exposes Sanemi's hypocrisy regarding the hunt for Onis, which was driven by a desire for revenge instead of justice. Sanemi is subjected to confiscation. But what would be confiscated in a world where there are no cursed techniques? C. The judgment identifies wind breathing as a combat technique or the defendant's main weapon, instantly sealing Sanemi's ability to enhance his movements with the power of wind breathing. And seeing the most aggressive Hashira in the squad reduced to a mere novice hunter with slow movements creates immense surprise among the Hashiras, silencing even the hostility. And it leaves Gyomi perplexed. Give a like here if you've also felt that Sanemi needed a lesson in manners straight from the Japanese penal code to humble him a bit. While Higuruma was giving Sanemi a lesson, Kagaya Ubuyashiki, the leader of the organization, arrives and intervenes in the fight. Kagaya tells everything about Muzan Kibutsuji. And there's a detail about Higuruma's final technique that will change everything you think about the end of Muzan Kibutsuji, but we'll get there. Buyashiki, with his wisdom, realizes that Higuruma is the turning point he has been waiting for centuries. Upon realizing that he was teleported to another century and possibly what he could understand as another dimension, Higuruma offers to help the Demon Slayers put an end to all the suffering caused by Muzan. In other words, Higuruma seeks justice for that world. Higuruma is assigned to accompany Tanjiro and the others on the Infinity Train alongside Kyoji Rengoku, the Flame Hashira. This is not surprising for Tanjiro, it happens to us. Higuruma gets along very well with Rengoku, both have a very strong sense of justice. And right when the hunters are put under Enmu's Kikijutsu and Nezuko uses the rope, Higuruma, along with Tanjiro and Inosuke, head towards Enmu to exterminate the Oni. Higuruma easily exterminates Enmu after receiving the Executor's sword, and as soon as the train derails, Akaza, Upper Moon 3, appears. What do you think will happen from here on? Will Higuruma be able to save Rengoku and defeat Akaza? Look, Akaza is an extremely fast Oni. It took Tanjiro, near his peak, fighting alongside Tomioka at his peak to defeat the Oni. So, even if Higuruma uses his domain expansion on Akaza and receives the Executor's sword, he would still be in trouble dealing with the Oni. It's important to understand that Higuruma has reflexes and strength honed in battle against prodigies like Yuji Itadori and the King of Curses himself. In terms of power scale, his agility and precision are comparable to those of an elite Hashira, like Tomioka or Sanemi, though that alone still doesn't match Akaza's agility. But it's important to note that when judging Akaza's crimes, Higuruma confiscates the Oni's Kikijutsu and receives his sword right at the start of the fight, with Kyojuro Rengoku at full strength fighting by his side, which makes victory relatively easy and certain. In other words, Rengoku survives and Akaza is defeated. This makes Muzan extremely furious. After all, he just lost one of his favorite upper moons. When he sees that the hunters are heading straight to the entertainment district through Nezuko's eyes, Muzan prepares a special surprise for Higuruma. When facing Daki and Gyutaro, Tanjiro will awaken Hinokami Kagura. Up to this point, the hunters would end up having a lot of trouble against the Upper Moon 6 demons. Despite that, Higuruma is here and he has already confiscated Daki and Gyutaro's Kikijutsu, making Daki extremely useless without her sash manipulation, and Gyutaro relatively weaker without his Kikijutsu. However, Oni was still fast and extremely strong. But the real problem arises when Kokushibo surprises everyone with his Kikijutsu, destroying everything around. With his insane attack of crescent moons hitting all the hunters, including Higuruma, who receives a blow that could be fatal, something that could kill him in minutes. Tanjiro, seeing the scene, becomes completely desperate. The tide seems to have turned in the Oni's favor. Kokushibo, standing before the hunters, instills terror, fighting against Uzui and interfering in Gyutaro's battle. Fortunately, by observing Kokushibo's movements, Tanjiro notices that the moon breathing has movements similar to the dance his father used to perform, and then, in a moment of desperation, Tanjiro awakens Hinokami Kagura, preventing Tengen from being killed. However, this is not enough for the hunters to have any chance against Kokushibo or Upper Moon 1. At the moment when Kokushibo would end the battle with a single strike, using his moon breathing and relentless speed in the blink of an eye, Kokushibo finds himself before Higuruma's court. See, when Sukuna cuts off Higuruma's arms, he forces him to use reverse energy to heal himself or die, which led to awakening this ability to regenerate his right arm. Here, it wouldn't be any different. With Higuruma's genius being comparable to Satoru Gojo's, Higuruma heals himself and then sentences Kokushibo to death, taking away his Kekijutsu and receiving the Executioner's sword. And look, while Daki is completely useless without being able to use her sashes, Nezuko easily holds back Oni, while all the hunters fight alongside Tengen to exterminate Gyutaro. Meanwhile, Higuruma is still having difficulties in the fight against Kokushibo since he hasn't had his breathing confiscated, and his mastery of it combined with his Oni body makes him a formidable opponent for the genius. With Gyutaro and Daki being exterminated, Higuruma receives support from the hunters. Tanjiro awakens his hunter's mark and, by observing Kokushibo, learns about the transparent world, becoming the key piece to corner Upper Moon 1 so that Higuruma can exterminate him. However, the battle lasts until dawn, which exposes Nezuko to the sun, making her immune to it. This causes Muzan, despite his failure in sending his strongest demon to deal with Higuruma, to leave his hiding place in order to absorb Nezuko and become a perfect demon. Note that up until now, Higuruma has completely changed the story of Demon Slayer. He saved Rengoku and destroyed two of Muzan's strongest demons, Akaza and Kokushibo. And with the awakening of the Hinokami Kagura, the Demon Slayer mark, and the transparent world, Tanjiro can now gain a slight advantage in his upcoming battles. The Hashira training begins, and Higuruma trains alongside the Demon Slayers to become even faster. When Muzan invades the organization and takes everyone to the Infinity Castle, the final battle begins. This time, Higuruma preserves his energy for the fight against the Demon King, not using his domain expansion, but fighting with the rest of his arsenal against the demons. On the other hand, the battle in the castle is 10 times easier without Kokushibo and Akaza, keeping the strongest Hashiras free to deal with the weaker demons. And with Rengoku present, the board is different. Shinobu, alongside Gyu, exterminates Doma with reinforcements from Kanao and Inosuke. Rengoku and Muichiro exterminate Gyoko, while Sanemi and Gyomei exterminate Hantengu. As the castle collapses with Nakime's fall thanks to the efforts of Obanai, Mitsuri, and now Tanjiro by their side, the hunters come face to face with Muzan, the king of the demons. And finally, we have reached the most anticipated moment, the judgment of Muzan Kibutsuji. Imagine the king of the demons, a being who sees himself as a law of nature, being forced to face the scales of justice. Muzan tries to destroy the domain from within. But Higuruma's rules are absolute, and they don't depend on physical strength. The judgment reveals Muzan's crime. The attempt to corrupt the natural order of life and death through 1,000 years of biological genocide. The verdict is the death penalty with the delivery of the executioner's sword. But notice that Muzan has 7 hearts and 5 brains, which makes him almost impossible to kill with simple cuts. All of his hearts and brains need to be cut at the same time. That's something only Iorichi was and still is able to do. However, the executioner's sword ignores biology. It attacks the soul of the condemned. When Higuruma advances, his speed is boosted by cursed energy, which rivals the hypersonic speed of a Hashira. Muzan defends himself in every possible way, but the Hashiras aren't as tired as they would be in the original timeline. And here's the thing, everyone is alive, even Genya. The hunters clear a path so that Higuruma can drive the executioner's sword into Muzan and end the war between humans and Onis, passing final judgment on the Demon King. After the hunters' great victory, humanity is finally at peace and everyone can move on with their lives. Higuruma says goodbye to everyone when Itadori and Yuta exterminate the curse that caused our man of justice to be teleported. So, did you like this theory? I picked out this video here, which I know is going to blow your mind. Watch it right now, just click on it. I'll see you there, otaku, and